Some people remember their previous lives, some people don't. But what if previous lives are not really previous? When I was a child, I often wondered, why don't we remember previous lives? I was brought up in a family that was not religious. It was not even anti religious. It was neutral. We never talked about these subjects. But still, from my early age, I remember often wondering, why can't we remember previous lives? And my question was, like when you go to a grocery shop and you say they did not have milk, you don't wonder, do they sell milk or not? The question is, why didn't they have milk today? And my question was, why can't we remember? I never even questioned if there are previous lives or not. That question didn't even occur. So I guess I was unlucky. I heard on TV, on the internet, in the books that some people do, but I didn't. And that was true for many years. Then, when I was around 30 years old, I went out with a friend. We were drinking a beer in a bar, and then it happened. Suddenly, I was on a porch of my house, and I immediately knew or understood, I was aware of many aspects of my life. And this was a life I had many years ago, centuries ago, in a way. And I don't know how much time was I on that porch. I guess in this life, everything happened in a second because my friend didn't notice anything. But my friend was opened for these subjects. So I immediately had to tell him, you know, I saw what my previous life was. And it's unbelievable because now I understand many of my life choices. I understand why I am as I am in many aspects. And I recognized a lot of people that are very important to me in this life. I recognize them in that life. It was really an amazing thing for me. And it made so much sense because that life was so um, so tied to this life. It's really amazing. But this experience, as amazing as it was, went by, and then many years went by, and I still had only one experience. Still, it was a treasure for me, but just one experience. After several years, a person came into my life that was obviously a person that I knew in another lifetime, an important person, because that event opened a door. I don't know how to call it, a multidimensional door into that previous life and many others, because everything was all over the place. This was a very strong event, a very weird time. And that's why I visited the shaman. And that shaman explained to me how that person related to one of my previous lives. And she also told me about some other previous lives. And let me give you an example. When I was a child, I was living near Italy, or at least near enough that we were able to see Italian television when the weather was favorable, because most of the time the picture was snowing, and sometimes the snow was so dense that you only get the voice and you had to imagine what was going on picture wise. But still, I was often watching Italian television because they had many cartoons, and one cartoon in particular. I watched that cartoon whenever that was possible. And even afterwards, when I was older, when we got the internet, that cartoon was not obtainable by regular means anymore, but I could download it. And that was the first thing I ever downloaded if I got a new computer, if I lost the previous one. I still have it. I don't watch it anymore, but I still have it. But anyway, when the shaman was telling me about my previous lives, she said, in one of those previous lives, you were growing up with a girl. She was not your sister, but you grew up like you were brothers and sisters. But then, when you grew older, you wanted to be something more. But you did not have the courage to tell her. And that's why she found someone else. And then your friends were telling you how did she live her life with that other man. When she ended the session, the first thing I said, not to her, to me out loud, because I needed to get it out of my system, was I knew Arthur was a wuss. Because the cartoon I was watching when I was a child was Lady Georgie. And what she described to me as one of my previous lives was almost exactly what happened in that cartoon. So I guess those who are skeptic about these things could say maybe this is just a coincidence. Or at most, maybe this is a story you had in you because you watched the cartoon so many times and she got that from you, not from a previous life, but from you. Fair enough. But let me tell you another thing. A few days after I visited the shaman, I met our neighbor in the hallway of our apartment building, and he said, a cartoon is waiting for you. What did he meant by that? He knew that my wife was attending um, drawing lectures. So, in a way, he could uh, be referring to my wife. But he said a cartoon is waiting for you in Slovenian. And our word for cartoon is risanka, and our word for a drawing is risba. So risanka, risba, similar words, but they are not the same word. And That means that if he was referring to my wife waiting for me, that would be an odd way to say it, and he would use the wrong word. But anyway, he was 80 years old, so I went home and I opened the door and I found my wife watching that cartoon. And even though she watched that cartoon when I was watching it, never before and never since did she watch it on her own. That day, she was waiting for me with that cartoon. So, in fact, that cartoon was waiting for me. Or let me give you another example. This one got nothing to do with that shaman. Before I started to make these videos, I had to overcome certain issues. And one of those was that I was extremely camera shy. I don't know anyone who is as camera shy as I was. If there was an event and if I was not able to hide behind the one that was taking pictures, I would go home. I would left the event because there was no way that I would let anyone take pictures of me. So I knew that this is something I had to solve. And I asked my wife for help because my wife also became energy healer. And she said, "No problem. We will do theta healing. We will do it on Saturday." But 2 days prior to that Saturday, she said, but I already know what the problem is. And in that exact moment, I got the picture. And I said, I know it too. It's one of my previous lives. And in that previous life, I looked like that. And we exchanged our view of how I looked. And it was the same man. It was exactly the same man. And she told me the story, and I understood what went wrong in that life. And that and her theta healing treatment fixed the problem. But the fact is that this view of my previous life did not only happen to her and did not only happen to me. We both had the same view of the same life. And I could tell you many more examples of my previous lives, but I don't want this video to be too long. And after all, what I really want to tell you is that even if I was talking about my previous lives, if I said previous lives many times during this video, what I really want to tell you in this video is that previous lives are not previous lives. We are so used to call our other lives previous lives that it is, if you want the people to accept what you are saying, if you don't want to scare them even before you begin, it is better to say previous lives. But the reality from which we come to this life experience has no time and no place. And if that reality has no time, then our other lives cannot be our previous lives. And lives we will have after this life will not be our next lives. All the lives we ever had and will ever have, and this is telling it from our perspective. All these lives are happening at the same time. So we never had previous lives and we'll never have next lives. We only have a multitude of lives at once. They are all happening now. If we would want to talk about previous lives and next lives, in a way, we could talk about lives that are situated in a timeline on this earth, in a timeline that is before now, and next life in a timeline that is after now. Maybe that would be the right way to use previous and next lives. But when we have a life on another planet that has nothing to do with Earth, the Earth lifetime has nothing to do with that timeline, if that reality has time at all. So that life must be another life. But as I said, all lives are another life, not previous, not next. It is true that when we remember our other lives, we remember them only when they are pertinent to our life and when they can do no harm to our life and when they are similar enough so that we can understand them in our life. So mostly when we remember other lives, we remember lives that we had on earth in a timeline that is before now. So in a way they are all previous lives. But otherwise all those lives, if you remember a life that you had in 15th century, that life is happening right now. And not many people who understand these things go into these things. They don't explain them to others because people like to hear about their previous lives. They want to know if they were Cleopatra or not. But to try to understand how can it be that all the lives that we will ever have are happening at the same moment, this is a little bit too much for most people to want to understand. But the fact that it is so implies affects, it not just implies, it affects many other things. Because if we think that we have lives the same way we have moments in this life, so that there is a linear time, that would mean that our previous lives are done. There is nothing we can do about them. And our next life will begin at the next time. And we are very limited with our possibilities. If we know that everything is happening now, we also know that we can influence all our lifetimes, previous, next, however you want to call it, we can influence all our lifetimes from this lifetime. When we try to make something out of us, not in this lifetime, but out of our core self, when we higher our vibration, when we learn something new, when we become something more, quote unquote, We influence who we are in this world and outside of this world. And when we influence who we are outside of this world, we obviously must influence also who we are in all our other lifetimes. I know this is a little bit much for most people to understand because we are used to think in a linear time manner. And we all know these um, problems scientists have. What if we could go back in time and if we would change something? These are problems that are unresolvable because, first, we think that time is linear, and second, we think that we live in a material world. But if we don't live in a material world, and if time is not linear, these are not no problems at all. We don't have enough time to go into details into this video, but the most important thing you can get out of it is that when you change yourself in this lifetime, for better or for worse, when you raise your vibration in this lifetime, you raise your vibration for every lifetime. And when you lower your vibration in this lifetime, you lower your vibration for every lifetime. So, your lifetime, in a way, it's more important than you thought it was. But at the same time, don't despair if you think that your life is not as good as you hoped it would be. If you think that you missed your chance, first of all, know that you have infinite amount of time to make it better because time that doesn't exist in a way it's infinite, and at the same time when you despair over things that already happened, you miss the chance to make it better in the future. What matters is now. The past is the past, learn from it, but what matters is what you do today. Because in an infinite time, all you ever have is now. And every now matters in a way. Even though you have an infinite time, why waste it with, I will do it tomorrow? And why waste it with what I did yesterday? Every now is a chance to do it right. And another thing, trust yourself. Some would say trust God. Trust that aspect of yourself that is not your name, that is not your role in this lifetime, but that part of you that is organizing everything, that part of you that is everything. That part of you knows how to organize your lives in a way that they have meaning even when you don't understand how they can have a meaning. Because sometimes you have a life that makes no sense at all, or that is a disaster from your point of view. But from the point of view of all of your lives, it can have a totally different meaning. Trust that everything has a meaning, even if from our quote unquote little perspective, we a lot of times don't understand the meaning. But when you learn to trust, then you can more easily go through those moments that are not pleasant or that makes no sense at all. And trusting in these things also means that you don't have you don't have the need to know everything. There is absolutely no need that you should know all your other lives, that you should remember them. Because if you don't remember any other life, that means that you don't have to. Your current life doesn't require that. Or when you do, you remember those that are pertinent for your current life. You cannot remember a lifetime that would make no sense to you because you have lives that are so different from this one that if somebody would try to explain that life to you, you could not make any sense out of it. And sometimes it is better for you not to remember a certain life. I guess this is why nobody, or almost nobody, remembers what we would call our next lives. Because you don't want to remember how Earth will be in 100 years. You should not know these things, and that's why you don't. And it's okay like that. So, my friend, if you remember your previous lives or not, doesn't really matter. You remember what you need to remember. Trust that you will always have everything you need for you to do what you need to do. You knew where you were going when you decided to have this life. And you knew how much you will remember your previous lives or not. Because, funny fact, if where you started from there is no time, that means that the whole life you are now having was available for you to see before you started this life. Think about that. If your ego is telling you that it is pointless to like, comment, and share my video with your friends, don't always listen to your ego. Listen to your heart, my friend.